The reinforced titanium canister remained empty. Yet Kale-N checked the pressure seals for the 14th time. Behind him, Zara was humming a tuneless melody while she shoved a neon-pink plastic umbrella into the side pocket of her rugged mesh trousers. Beside the human, the rest of the drop team stood like statues of polished obsidian, their heavy thermal plating catching the sterile glare of the hangar lights. Would you have opened the umbrella? Or would you have run for the extraction pods like the rest of us? Stay close. It gets stranger. Sector 4 was designed to kill everyone. According to the Valve or I Academy-S classification database, the planet below was a Class 9 toxic Hell's Cape, a world where the atmosphere itself acted as a slow-motion solvent. Beneath the observation deck, the swirling ochre clouds of the Deathworld waited to dissolve anything that lacked the proper isotopic shielding. Kalen felt his scales shift toward a muddy, fearful gray, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the heat-warped data cube tucked into his chest plate. It was the only recording of his siblings' laughter he had left, and the thought of the acid air reaching it made his secondary heart stutter. Across the bay, the Vexor commander clicked his mandibles in a sharp, staccato burst of derision. The human brings a toy to a chemical furnace, the officer rasped, the sound like dry husks grinding together. Sarah didn't look up from her bag, merely adjusting the strap of her canteen with a casual shrug. She seemed more concerned with the lack of a breeze in the staging area than the fact that we were about to plummet into a nightmare. In the heavy silence of the hangar, the contrast between her loose stance and our rigid terror felt like a physical weight. Into the deployment we marched. Rapidly the pressure changed, a sudden lurch in the gut that signaled the release of the drop pods into the atmospheric soup. Through the narrow viewport of the descent craft, Kale-N watched the first droplets of toxic rain strike the reinforced glass. The liquid didn't just beat a hissed, leaving faint, etched streaks on the grade A transparency. Beside him, Zara leaned forward, squinting at the acidic downpour with a look of mild disappointment. Honestly, Kale-N, the visibility here is better than a foggy Tuesday in London, she remarked. Her voice flat and unimpressed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, rectangular watch, checking the time with a mundane flick of her wrist. Horror filled Kale-N's mind as he looked at her. Beads of clear, salty liquid were beginning to sprout across the human's forehead, trickling down her temples in thick, rhythmic streams. To a Valve or I, whose biology relied on sealed, dry membranes, this was the ultimate sign of a catastrophic hull breach in the body. He feared her internal organs were liquefying, leaking through her pores as the planet's heat began to cook her from the inside out. Zara, your fluids, Kale-N hissed, his scales flashing a frantic, desperate violet. He reached for a canister of medical-grade sealant, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. What? I'm just a bit sticky, Zara replied, wiping her brow with the back of her hand and leaving a smear of moisture on her sleeve. It's the humidity. Kale-N, it feels like a steam room in here. Came the jolt of impact. The pod slammed into the melting crust of Sector 4. The stabilizers groaning as the external temperature spiked to levels that made the ship's sensors scream in protest. Beyond the hatch, the ground was a slurry of dissolved minerals and boiling mud, yet Zara was already standing, her hand reaching for the latch. Across the blistering, mud-choked expanse of Sector 4, the silence of the Vexor commander was more unnerving than the thunder. Within seconds of the airlock cycling, the thermal shield arrays on our suits began to whine, struggling against a pH level that would have turned a standard scouting vessel into a memory. Kale-N watched the ground smoke beneath his boots, his scales flashing a panicked, bruising purple as he tapped his chest plate. Beneath the titanium, the data cube with Bryness laughter remained dry, but the internal temperature of his suit was climbing. Then, the true storm arrived. From the ochre horizon, a wall of liquid corrosion swept toward them, carrying enough kinetic force to level a reinforced bunker. The Vexor squad immediately dropped into a defensive phalanx, overlapping their heavy alloy shields to form a dome of magnetic resistance. It was a masterpiece of military engineering, a Tier 1 response to a Class 9 Deathworld event. Zara, however, did not move toward the formation. She reached into the side pocket of her trousers, her expression bored as she struggled with the jammed zipper. "Zara, get inside the shield," Kale screamed, the audio from his helmet cracking under the atmospheric interference. Zara finally freed the zipper and pulled out the neon-pink plastic umbrella. "Honestly, Kalen, you're making such a fuss," she muttered, her voice incredibly calm over the cons. She popped open the cheap plastic umbrella while the ground melted around her. The umbrella was made of thin polyester and flimsy metal ribs, yet as the first wave of acid rain slammed into the canopy, the liquid simply rolled off the pink surface. Zara leaned against a jagged, smoking rock and adjusted her watch. She seemed more interested in the alignment of the hands than the fact that the atmosphere was currently trying to digest her. Beyond the thin canopy of her umbrella, the toxic sludge hit the ground with the sound of 1,000 frying pans. Kalen stared, his analytical mind fracturing. The Valth, or I understood isotope shielding, but he could not comprehend a biology that didn't just survive this environment, but found it tedious. Zara yawned, a wide, unhurried stretch that exposed the damp patches of sweat on her shirt. "Is this the big event?" Zara asked, her voice echoing with a slight tinny quality. "Because back home, we call this a light drizzle. In London, you still see people walking to the pub in this." The misunderstanding in Kalen's mind finally shattered. He had thought her sweat was the sign of her body dissolving a leakage of vital humors. He realized now, with a cold, terrifying clarity, that the liquid was a weapon of cooling. She wasn't melting, she was venting heat because her baseline biology was designed for a world far more violent than Sector 4th. Earth wasn't a Class 9 death world. It was something higher, something for which the Academy had no name. As the acid storm subsided, leaving the Vex or squad with pitted, ruined shields, Zara folded her pink umbrella with a satisfied click. The extraction ship descended through the thinning fog, and the commander stepped out, his mandibles frozen. He had seen the readings. He had seen the human napping against a rock that was still bubbling from the pH spike. "The warm-up is over, right?" Zara asked, stretching her arms as she climbed into the extraction bay. "I was hoping for something a bit more interesting." Kalen looked at the pink umbrella in her hand. The plastic was slightly faded, but the fabric was unmarred. He thought of the date at cube in his chest, the fragile memory of Bryn. And then he looked at the human who treated a planetary execution as a humid afternoon. "We never sent another squad to Sector 4th. It wasn't because the planet was too dangerous, but because after seeing Zara, the galaxy felt too small." The pink umbrella stood in the corner of the barracks later that night, its handle still wet with the last of the toxic rain. Beneath the dim lights of the station, the neon fabric glowed with a predatory, unnatural brightness. Kalen sat on his bunk, his scales a permanent, thoughtful blue, watching the human sleep